I also really love handmade data visualizations. So two of my favorite data viz people are Georgia Lupi and Stephanie Posavec. They wrote this book called Dear Data, where they wanted to get to know one another better. They were friends, and they kind of switched countries. I think one of them went to live in New York and the other one was in London. And so they created this project where every week they decided something to keep data on, and then they collected data for a week and did the visualization by hand. So I don't actually remember what this week's postcard is representing, but here are some of the postcards that they sent to one another. This was the week of doors. So they kept track of data about the doors that they passed through, and then they each wrote the other one a data postcard. And on one side is the data visualization, on the other is an explanation of how to read that data visualization. I think that these are really creative and different. Another person who I love in this space is Mona Chalabi. Mona worked for The Guardian. She had a sort of advice column, a data-based advice column where she would answer your questions based on data. And she has this wonderful Instagram where she does hand-drawn or handmade visualizations. Here's a bar chart that I really like because it's made of chocolate bars and it's showing the amount of Halloween candy sold based on the holiday. Here's another one. This one is hand drawn, and this is kind of a histogram, I guess, about the average age of home buyers over time, and she's drawn little homes. So I think that's really, really nice. There's also data visualization that gets really personal. So most of this data visualization has been made for an audience, either for a news reading audience or for someone who follows Mona Chalabi on Instagram, but people sometimes do this for really personal reasons. So here's a photo of Nicholas Felton. He's on the left. He's there with Aaron Swartz, who was a hacker and very involved in the development of a number of technologies on the internet. But Nick is the data viz guy. And Nicholas did this project, I think for almost 10 years, where every year he produced an annual report, but the annual report was just about him. So in 2009, he made these cards that he handed out to people. And every time he had an interaction with someone, he'd give them a card that would say something like, an encounter with Nicholas Felton has entitled you to participate in the Feltron 2009 annual report. And then there's a URL on the back, and you would go to that URL and you would record what did you talk about? What mood did you think that Nicholas was in? And things like that, so that he could collect data on every single aspect of his life. And he produced these books, essentially, and they were data visualizations, but just about his life. It was like an autobiography or a memoir, but it was done in data visualization. So Olga, I think, is his partner, and so here's some visualization of where he went with Olga over the course of 2011. In 2013, he kept track of all his electronic interactions, so all of his text messages, all of his email, his Facebook messages. He also kept track of physical mail that he got. And so then he had a record of all the communications he'd had with every person over the course of a year. And so what he decided to do, in addition to the annual report, which is full of data visualization about himself, and you can actually buy these books. I think that's an interesting thing where, again, it's like a memoir, but it's through data. So in addition to the public book, which is summarized in aggregated data visualization, he told people that were in the data that if they wanted a copy of all the communications with him, he would give it to them. And so again, this has to do with Olga, his partner. This is the book of all the interactions that Nicholas had with his partner over the course of an entire year. So he got it published. And again, I think this is a really interesting way to think about data and visualize it or display it in a particular way. I'm also really interested in weird visualizations. So far we've been talking about those visual attributes like color and texture and shape, and we've got points and lines. But sometimes people push the envelope even further. So there's this idea of sonification, which is where you would use sound to display data. And This is a nice piece about the gold medalists in the 100-meter dash, and it's trying to show how much faster Usain Bolt was than everyone who had ever medaled in that event. I don't think I have a good way to show this to you with the sound, so you'll have to go look at it yourself, but it's really worth your time. That's sonification. People have gone even further. There's this project called Data Cuisine, which is tastification of data. So this one is more visual. This is displaying the amount of energy in Switzerland that comes from renewable sources. So it's sort of a pie chart, but it's made of a pizza pie, which I think is really interesting. And then a more literal tastification. This is by Nathan Yao. Again, he did a project called Brewing Multivariate Beer, where he took information from the census about different areas, and he used that data to decide how much of different attributes to put into beer, like the hops and yeast. And then you could actually taste what was different about those different areas. I think he decided that it wasn't a very successful experiment. The beer wasn't very good, but it's an interesting way to think about it. And then even further afield, there have been some workshops like Tiga Brain has Eat the Data, Smell the Data, where they try and do data visualization or data smellification. So trying to display data but through smell. So what are my takeaways here? I think it's important to think about relationships that go beyond two variables. You might want to try breaking down your data visualizations by another variable and keeping an eye out for Simpson's paradox. You can add more variables to a scatter plot by adding point colors, breaking it into two visualizations, animating it over time. There's special visualization types when it comes to geographic data or time data. And really, there's just many, many creative ways to do data visualization. So you can probably tell that this is something that I really love. I actually teach a semester-long course that's about data communication and visualization. So if you want to know more, you should take that.